Hey, welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with. It's the interview series presented by WFPK at WFPK.org, Consequence, and the Consequence Podcast Network. Thanks as always for making your way here and check out the series. Of course, you know what to do. If you like what you see, what you hear, hit that subscribe button. I put out 3 new interviews every single week, so it's a great way to keep up with all of your favorite artists. And I'm so excited. Japanese House is back with a brand new album called In the End, It Always Does. And Amber is here. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me on the show.
It's great to have you here. Loved what you've done through the whole run, but there does seem to be something a little bit extra special about this record, and I've heard you talk about it quite a lot, and it's interesting to me, I guess, when it's being released, because if I've got this right, like you started this in 2021, you wrapped it in 2022, and finally here we are in 2023. Is it? Do you find now that having just lived with it for this long, that now that it's out, that that it reveals maybe anything that it hadn't before?
Um, I mean, I often make music, like have songs that are from when I was a teenager. There's one song on this album that I wrote when I was like 17 or 18, which is You Always Get What You Want. And I think like after a certain there's like an initial period when you're writing that you feel so connected to something, and then afterwards it feels like almost like you're like hearing it as a new listener rather than like the person who wrote it. So I have that a lot with this record. um and yeah, like there's certain songs on the record I still can't really listen to without, unless I'm like fully accepting that I'm gonna feel sad. For example, One More Sorry Two for Joni Jones. Like when I listen to that, it doesn't really even feel like I wrote it, because it just feels like, yeah, I feel so far away from that feeling that it almost, yeah, feels like another person wrote it at this point.
It's an interesting relationship. I mean, starting a song and being in one frame of mind, time passing, finishing a song, being in a different frame of mind. Like
Yeah.
it's an interesting relationship, I think, to have with any of the songs, because I mean, not that I'm saying the first half you wrote in the first, but does it? Can you see those moments still in the song? Like, oh, that's who I was then, and that's who I was then.
Yeah, and like I also think that when I'm writing, a lot of these songs I'd initially written like the first verse and chorus or whatever at one point, and then I'd come back to the song and finished it when I was at a different point. And that often happens, like I often feel like there's some sort of like prophetic element to writing, and because I guess you're like um pulling from like a really deep part of your consciousness, or like deep part of your mental, like your psyche, so that like it's kind of revealing. And you often be like, oh, why am I saying this random thing? But then months down the line, that random thing ends up happening, or like that's actually what you end up believing. So it's quite interesting that, like, for example, Sunshine Baby, I started writing when I was trying to fix my relationship, and then I finished writing it when my relationship was over. And so the first verse is like the verses are written when my relationship was over, and that chorus was written when I was trying to grasp onto the last kind of crumbs of it. Um, and it's kind of funny because when I listen to that chorus now, I don't hear it as like uh, necessarily very hopeful. I kind of hear it as a like resignation to a relationship, but it wasn't supposed to be.
That's interesting, because you have, of course, the relationship songs. You've talked a lot about inspiration came on this record from your current relationship to your own identity. On top of that, and I don't know how much that plays into it, but go into an album with that much to explore. How clear does it start out as that versus maybe, as you're saying, it's something you look back on and go, "Oh, that's what I'm talking about."
Um, I mean, yeah, I rarely like have it. Yeah, it does. I think you're right. It feels like I come back to something and be like, kind of gain understanding as to what the hell I'm talking about much after it's written. Uh, like it's rare that I'll sit down and be like, I want to write a song about this. Sometimes I do, and like those songs kind of tend to be the more like poppy leaning songs, because it's like with an intention behind it, and like I want this song to be like this. But like most of the time I'm just sitting there like feeling like writing about something, and I really genuinely have no idea what I'm saying. Usually, like I think in my head it's just like complete gibberish. Like all the lyrics of Boyhood were gibberish, like actual gibberish for a long time, and I kind of like was like I kind of feel like I'm trying to say this when I'm saying blah blah blah, and like it just turned out and to be like something that I was really thinking about a lot about at the time. But yeah, I definitely come back to the meaning afterwards most of the time.
Yeah, yeah. You hear about songwriting as like therapy. It's almost a cliche. Excuse me.
Yeah, no, it is therapeutic, and it's like um I mean, it can be like kind of damaging as well in terms of like sometimes you don't really want to face those things at that time, and it kind of like I've definitely written songs that have catalyzed uh like something that wouldn't have happened otherwise had I not written that song, or had I not thought about it in that moment or time.
Yeah.
So
Well, some of the songs I did want to hit on here too, because first off, that opening track, Spot Dog,
mhm.
in the opening piano, it's almost like it's almost like it's disjointed a little bit and still pulls itself together. I kept thinking about the more and more I listened to it, try not to get too heady here, but I felt like I was walking by a room and just caught a fleeting moment of two people inside making this music. It almost feels like toys in a way, the music to that one, if that makes sense. Where did that come
like
from?
like taught yeah I mean, the initial piano thing is just something I wrote a few years ago because I was watching 101 Dalmatians, and I really like there's this theme called, I think it's called A Beautiful Spring Day, and like I really just love that piece of music, and it's like so nostalgic for me, and it's one of the first like things I became obsessed. 101 Dalmatians was probably one of the first things that I ever became like obsessed with, and I'd watch it on repeat and repeat and repeat, and like to the point where the video like broke because I'd watched it so many times like, every day. Um, and so that music for me is like so ridiculously nostalgic. So I got re-obsessed with the music and like started listening to it, and I love that kind of piano style. So I tried to like kind of replicate that in an almost like tongue-in-cheek way. Like it's like me bashing a keyboard basically when I'm playing it. Um, and then it turns into this kind of like I feel like that song is really a good like it's like the palette for the whole album in a way. Like there's a lot of like acoustic, more like intricate piano-y stuff, and then there's also like a kind of more electronic element, and I feel like yeah, it has this sort of like everything that every song probably has some sort of like pull from Spot Dog in a way.
Yeah, that was my first movie I ever saw in a theater, 101 Dalmatians.
Really,
Yeah,
the
which
classic.
not during the initial run, obviously, because what was that? It was the 40s or 50s, but yeah,
Yeah.
that was the first thing I ever saw. Set right up front. That's 101 Dalmatians as sort of a little bit of the inspiration for the first song. Love Actually, if I read right, in the closing song, and Boyhood directly in the middle. Is that right?
Love Actually is no, not true, but
Okay.
I don't know where that got picked up. I think I like the song, the feeling that that song gives me is so, like I guess I was trying to capture the same, that song by Joni Mitchell, who obviously that song is inspired by. There's a song called Both Sides Now, which she redid. Uh, there's an early version of her playing it on guitar, and then she redid it. And they used it in the soundtrack for Love Actually, and that that like moment where Emma Thompson is fine opens the Joni Mitchell CD, and it's like this heart wrenching moment. Like that song, I was once talking in an interview like about how that song perfectly encapsulates that feeling of kind of like uh I don't know, just like I guess poignant, but then and that's kind of the same kind of feeling that I was trying to capture in that song, but it has absolutely nothing to do with actually Love Actually. um I actually think that film is extremely problematic, but I then Boyhood, what did you say Boyhood was again?
Well,
influenced by.
I am piecing together things I've read, and I might have the wrong context here, but the Richard Linklater movie, I was just actually thinking about
Yeah.
how wondering actually how often movies might lead the way for you. I love when that happens, because we take so
Hmm.
much, from everyday life, but when a songwriter says, "Oh, I took this from the movie," I don't know
Yeah.
why that sort of takes it to a new level, a different plane for me.
It's yeah, definitely get inspired by films for sure. Like yeah, the Boyhood thing, that it is partially inspired by that. That's definitely what the title is drawn from. Because originally I was thinking about like obviously that film you get to watch a kid grow up, and he's exactly the same age as me, and like there's some crossover there. And I think it makes me think about like childhood, like all the things that happen in childhood, and like how all these things we see this person experience like inevitably will become a part of him in some way, and like he'll spend then his adulthood like trying to figure out why certain things have been caused by certain things. And like I was thinking about that with regards to myself, and then I started thinking about that with regards to gender and stuff. But yeah, I do feel like um I am definitely influenced by more than just other music. Like I'm influenced a lot by what I read. Like um I was reading a lot of poetry when I was writing this album. Like I was much more inspired by reading than I was listening with this album in a lot of ways. Because I feel like there's certain things that like open you up to being creative and like inspire you. And sometimes with music, it's hard to only be inspired by music because then you can't help but want to directly copy it and be like, I want that, so I need to do that. Whereas if you look at other mediums, then it's like, oh, I want that feeling. And then you try to replicate that in a different form of art, and then it doesn't feel like plagiarism, it just feels like being inspired.
The whole feeling that comes along with it. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
with the music though, and I did want to this only because we've brought up Joni a few times, but the indexical reminder almost feels like a Joni riff, almost, and maybe that's
Yeah,
because the
that's for
DNA's
sure.
there, right?
Yes, it's her tuning, her like go-to tuning.
Yeah,
Um, dad, fad, I want to say, or yeah. Um, it's like that both sides now kind of original guitar tuning. Um, that's what I used for that song because I was really playing around with that. And like yeah, this, I mean, the last few years I've been so inspired by Joni Mitchell. I even named my dog after her, so it's no secret.
yeah, right. Well, that's why I mean, her DNA is in every piece of music that's come after. It's one of those artists,
Mhm.
like it's just
Yeah.
like inescapable for most anybody. I think you can find the traces there, but that song and it, like the way you do those lyrics, by the way, in that track, I leave my things around. Look at this clip I found. It's like I can see that. I can see everything you're saying in one of those moments. Wherein Sad to Breathe, whereas I can't tell if the things I have I just don't want, or the things I want I just don't get.
Oh yeah. God, that's a
That's
dramatic little lyric, isn't it?
but that's fun to play around with. That's fun to play around with, you just to think about
Yeah.
it. Like that's one of those I'd wonder, like, do you look back on that one and think, has it changed? Where are you? Where are you within that line right now?
I don't relate to that at all right now. Um, like I remember relating to that, and I think there's like that's why I kind of with that song it's interesting because I wrote the original part of it, and it was kind of like slow and acoustic, like it didn't go double time. Um, and I think the reason we came back to it, and it's like there's some weird kind of joy in that track, even though it's so sad lyrically. I think it's because I don't feel like I can relate to that kind of part of my life at all. Like I can't even imagine being there. But I think it's like I actually think that lyric's kind of funny. Like I think there's like a lot of there are a lot of lyrics on this album that I think are like over the top, supposed to be like dramatic, because I think when you are feeling like heartbroken or like depressed, like it does feel like that. It does feel like over the top and dramatic, and it feels like your world's about to end. And then there's like a sweetness in coming back to that and being like, it didn't.
Yeah, yeah. I think that it is that, going back to where we started at the beginning of the interview, talking about like being separated almost like you'd be covering yourself, covering someone else, when you play that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Speaking of covers, and I'll wrap with this too. Did I see that you covered ABBA's Super Trooper?
I did. Yeah, I love that song.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't love that song.
How do you feel about that song?
It's like one of my least favorite ABBA songs, but then because I found it kind of annoying, when because it's so fast and I don't know, ABBA are like one of my favorite bands, and I'm more of like a slipping through my fingers kind of guy. But that song, I just found it like almost like too happy. But then I started playing it randomly on the piano once, and I was like, oh my god, these are the saddest lyrics I've ever heard in my life. Like I'd never really listened to the lyrics before, like what it was all about, and also that it's just such a lovely chord sequence, and it's just such a well written song. And I think I don't know, like I love it when the core of a song is so clever and that you don't really realize it, and then you strip it back and you play it on piano and you're like, oh, this is a ballad. Like I think all the best songs, if you play it as a ballad and it sounds like that, it will sound amazing. So now I love it as a song, but that sounds really arrogant. Like I only love it because of my version of it. But
No, it's what it comes down to. It's ABBA. It's just the band that keeps on giving. That's
yeah, that's true.
I love this album. In the end, it always does. I'm so grateful we got to talk about it. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. I'm really glad you like the album.
And thanks to my guest. Also, thanks to you for checking out the episode in the series. Before you get out of here, hit that subscribe button. Again, you get 3 brand new interviews every single week. New one every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at right here on YouTube, or of course anywhere in podcast land, including iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, NPR, or WFPK.org as well. A great way to keep up with your favorite artists and discover new ones as well. Then after that, actually head over to WFPK.org. That's where I do a show Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern. It's an hour full of song premieres, music news, anniversary spins, bonus interviews, Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern at WFPK.org. Consequence has your music and film news. You can also find me on the social media spots, Facebook, Instagram, mostly on Twitter. All 3 of them, the address is at Kyle Meredith. Do hope you like and follow along. That does it for another edition. I'm Kyle Meredith. I'll see you next time.